Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you once again by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is a comic shop owner and the creator of ComicHub, a suite of tools for comic shops looking to improve the experience for retailers, readers, and publishers alike. It's Stu Colson. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, we're going to talk about ComicHub here in a little bit. That's the main focus for today. But I actually wanted to start with the fact that you are a comic retailer yourself, because I imagine that's a big part of the ComicHub story in of itself. You own Heroes for Sale, which is a shop in Auckland, New Zealand. How did you get started with that, and why did you want to get into comic book retail?
I'd had a couple of businesses prior to that. I was involved in a pizza franchise, and I was involved in some database marketing. And the database marketing program I had worked on for a couple of years, and I kind of burnt out. We did a very big, exciting project to start with. We think we may have written the world's first rewards program at point of sale.
Oh, wow.
It was a project I was involved in with a very seasoned marketer down here in New Zealand, and the New Zealand Statistics Department, and Kmart and Auckland University. So we were tracking point of sale for Kmart. And the idea was that we were originally, the guy who I worked with, he sort of did the deal with Kmart and University to say that we had this product and we would license it to Kmart, and he got me involved to write all the to be the admin guy for that. And we had the project all sorted, and then he said, I'll go off to the US now and we'll find this thing. So we'd basically lied that we had a product to a major company. And after about 3 weeks, he comes back and he says, look, it doesn't exist. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I can't find this anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, we go live in 10 weeks. And he's like, yeah. Can you write it?
Oh, my God.
Okay. So for the next 2 years, I basically, one-man band, wrote this software that was tracking all of Kmart's point of sale and a big rewards program for a store they had down in Palmerston North. And I just worked 7 days a week, sort of 12, 14 hours a day on that. And we got to the point where we'd taken their worst store to be their second best performing, but we were never part of the mix. We weren't the marketing department. We weren't the IT department. We were this kind of outlier. So we got caught up in politics there. Mm. And after 2 years, the product worked and I was just burnt out. But it was software, so I'd made good money. And in the end, I just said, look, man, I'm out. I quit. And I walked away. And I had the pizza business in the background as a part-time product or business. And then I thought, well, what do I really, really like? And I'd been a big comic fan, so I thought, I'm just going to take this money I've made. And I went and opened up a comic shop. And because I'd just come from a big IT background with all this database marketing, for the first sort of 10, 15 years, I sat in my shop sort of screaming at the data, going, this is a mess. This needs to get sorted. And I could see the potential of where it all had to go. And because I'd already done potentially one world first software product, I thought, well, I'm going to do this for my own store. Mm-hmm. So I dusted off some software books and wrote my own point of sale system. And the entire time it was, did we circle back to that? So the whole time I worked on that again, but because it was from my own shop, I was a lot more passionate about it. And then some other people saw it and liked the idea of it. But I basically opened up a comic shop because I love comics. I love stories, but comics is my favorite platform for consuming them.
Yeah. I have to say, it sounds like you're probably the one comic retailer who got into the business and may have actually done less work, because, most of the time people are like, oh man, I can't wait to open a comic shop. I love comics. I can do this. This is going to be great. And they're like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. And you're like, finally a break. Finally.
Yeah. Sunday's off. All right.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say, it's funny. It's like last night I was thinking about it, And I was like, every time I travel somewhere, I always try to go to comic shops in that area. I have been in your shop. I'm 99% certain because I know that I stayed in the Mount Eden area when I was in Auckland, and I actually walked down. I was down in like the area where yours was, and I'm like, I remember going to a shop in that area and thinking it was really clean and like really nicely laid out. And then I looked at pictures. I was like, oh my god, I think this is the shop I was in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was just like, wow, I did not even realize that. But, before we get into ComicHub, I do want to talk about one thing, one major difference between, well, potential major difference is, New Zealand shoppers are probably different. It's quite a bit different market than American comic shops probably. Do you feel like there's this, I know you've been to Comics Pro because I saw you at Comics Pro's annual meeting in 2018. Do you find that when you talk to your American peers in the retail side of things that your shop behaves significantly different than theirs, or is it pretty much the same?
I think there's a lot of similarities to the point that I have some conversations with retailers, and when they talk about some of the problems they have, I do my best not to eye roll. It's like, you got to be kidding me, man.
Right.
When they talk about freight costs, I'm thinking, you want to try air freighting this stuff across half the planet every week, and let's look at the cost of that, and then problems they have with items they might not be able to get because it's sold out. I mean, if we get short shipped from Diamond. And I'm searching a global network to replace those orders for my customers as opposed to getting it from the friendly shop up the road. Or there's a lot of items in the catalogue that some people have noticed will have, only available inside the US or Canada. So there's a lot of restrictions and things as well. So that's probably the biggest difference, is the things that we can't get and the extra costs. But beyond that, we're dealing with fans. So I think the good side of the industries are the same. Mm-hmm. The enjoyment of dealing with the customers and the way our industry works. I think that's all comparable. I think it's just there's a few extra costs and a little bit more work for some of the things that we have to do for some of our customers. But that's just business. So
yeah. I had Jacob Sorelli, who's the co-owner of Kamikaze in Israel, on my podcast recently, and we were talking about some of those things. I mean, obviously, he's facing similar, not exactly the same, but similar problems when it comes to costs and shipping times. And as a person who lives in Anchorage, Alaska, not the same. But at the same time, Anchorage, Alaska is pretty far away from pretty much everything. It's like we also only have 2 shops in the entire state, and so it's like, if we want to go to the shop that's down the road, it's actually like 8 hours down the road.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't actually, how many shops do you know of in New Zealand? Are there several?
I think there's, my last count, I think there's about a dozen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about ComicHub. You already started kind of getting into it a little bit. If you wouldn't mind, like one of the things, like when I was, when that piece came out from ICV2 that was breaking down your deal with Boom, I noticed that there was a slew of people who kind of didn't seem to really understand what ComicHub was. Like I saw some people describe it as an outside marketing firm, which I was like, that is definitely not what it is.
No.
But at the same time, it's not just a point of sale system. What is your elevator pitch for what ComicHub is, and how did it first get started?
My elevator pitch for it's a retail information flow solution. That's my what I'm trying to brand it as, which is a riffs. Because the biggest problem isn't having a POS; it's managing the information and the amount of it that we have. And that was the big part of where the whole idea of ComicHub started. It was the idea that 3,000 retailers would have to do the same thing to the same piece of information each week or each month. It was like, this is crazy. We need to centralize how we manage this flow of information around all parts of our industry, whether it's coming from a publisher to a retailer or a publisher trying to connect directly with the consumer or the supplier, whatever. And a big part of that also was the amount of email that we get from different sources. It's just about a full-time job trying to keep on top of reading a lot of information, and a lot of that information is duplicated. and then it's also really going to the wrong person. So there was a few kind of epiphany moments where I remember at one point when I was looking at previews, trying to work out an order for 1 month and getting angry at the publishers. Like, this is the publisher's fault. This information's not getting to who needs to see it. And then when I broke that down a little bit further, it was, well, the publishers are really supplying the suppliers who then forward it to me. So it was the supplier's fault that I'm having trouble trying to work this out. And then at the end, it was that whole, this is actually my fault. And it's that kind of, I don't know who's going to be listening to this. I'm sure there's going to be retailers, but at the end of the day, we can't make the decisions for our customers anymore. I mean, it worked 20 years ago when you were focusing and it was all DC and Marvel and you could kind of guess. But the market is so varied now. The idea that a retailer knows what his customers are all going to want is just crazy. So being stuck there is that, you know, we became the block and the flow of information. And so there was that whole, it's not the publisher's fault, it's not the supplier's fault, it's my fault. It's me trying to decide what these people or what my customers want is arrogant as well, to say that here's the X amount of comics I'm going to put on the shelf for you to read this week. So the first part was we need to find a way to get the information to the consumers, but that information needs to roll back to retailers. So we needed a portal that it would allow, or an information solution that would allow creators and publishers to communicate directly with my customers. But the key is any orders that come out of that have to come back to me as a retailer. So one of the things that we have, ComicHub is only available, the point of sale side of ComicHub is only available to brick and mortar retailers. We're not stocking up. We're not supplying web only, and we're not supplying buying clubs. It's for comic shops, because that's where the greater need is for our industries, to make sure that we're all healthy. But yeah, the existing tools that we were using just don't work, and that includes the existing point of sale systems on the market. They just they allow the retailer to remain the block in the information flow, and we need to get out of the way. And you know, every client we've got now who's using all the customer tools to their fullest ability will talk about how they now get orders for comics that they would never have ordered themselves. And that's a big part of, I know when we first went live with the app, I think it was about sort of 6 to 8 weeks later, I remember processing a shipment in the store and scanning some items and fuck diamond, whose box is this? These are not my, you know, at first when I saw the products on the counter, I thought, this isn't my stuff. And then as I started scanning it, customers' names start coming up on the screen as to who it's for. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know he ordered that. I didn't know he ordered that. And that was a big part of when I knew it was going to be, you know, once we get the idea out there, it was going to be a success, because it increases your sales.
Yeah. So you're talking about internally, like when you first launched it at Heroes for Sale, you started seeing products coming in that you're like, I have never ordered this before.
I would never have ordered it. I didn't know customers would want, you know, it's a big catalog. Yeah,
I have to admit, I actually took on a project where I was going to do a Patreon post for my podcast where I was going to spend basically, like, I was going to do a podcast just for my patrons where I was going to go through an issue of previews and discuss what I find and yada, yada, yada. And I lasted about 20 minutes before I realized that path lies insanity. And I just couldn't handle it. But so you know, from that discoverability side of things, like how does ComicHub help customers discover books? Because I guess that's one angle that I wasn't certain of. It seems like it's really good for a way for, you know, customers to update their pull lists. It seems like it's a great way for publishers to, you know, see kind of results of how everything's doing, and also to perform and do advertising as Boom is doing, et cetera, et cetera. How does it aid in discoverability?
So from a customer's website or their app, one of the things that they can build, and that we're always helping our customers work out, is playlists. Because we've also, you know, for a long time been stuck in, and we have too many customers who assume comics are superhero.
Right.
So and I use the playlist when I'm now doing my orders. So I can go in and say, right, I want to see all of the so from a customer's example point of view, this is someone I was working with yesterday, and it was, okay, you're into horror. So at the beginning of the month, when you get the email saying there's a new catalog loaded, go to your playlist and just select your horror playlist, and it will show you all the new number ones coming out that are in the horror genre. Or if you're a big fan of Cullen Bunn, you could, something like that, you can create a playlist as like, these are my 15 favorite writers. I want to see everything that my writers that I follow are doing this month. So customers are spending less time looking through the previews, but are making more orders from the catalog because it's more succinct. They're not flipping through the pages of stuff that they have no interest in. They can just drill straight down to who they're trying to follow, or the products, the type of product that they want to follow. And that expands out to brands, so you can see like what's every bit of Batman merchandise coming out this month, and then the orders just go direct to the store. So you're just building them up, and then that's where they end up. Yeah. So that's the customer side of what's going on with the information. Yeah.
So there's like a personalization element where you can kind of fine tune it to yourself. Is there anything automatic? Is there like an algorithmic element to it, or is it just purely based off of the inputs you put in as a customer?
There's a bit of both. So, and some of the algorithmic stuff is what we're using for the publishers to help them with it.
Sure.
And we are bringing some more tools in for customers continuously. That's the other side. I guess we'll get to that part later for ComicHub. But so publishers would then look at it, the metadata, and they would say, so in the case of Once and Future, Boom can say, I'd like to connect to everybody who has bought comics by Kieran Gillen.
Right.
And then they create the marketing asset in their portal. And it's an email, and then they'll put up some preview pages for that. And then they actually don't connect direct to the customer. They connect to the retailer. So they push down the campaign to the retailer, and the retailer then approves or denies it. So, and it will say to the retailer, Boom are doing this Kieran Gillen new launch, and from the metadata, they've identified that they can connect with 6,000 people who are into Kieran Gillen, and in your store, that's 350. And so here's the email that we want to send out to those people. And the email will then come from the shop. So one of the things that everything we're doing at ComicHub is new, so we're always training everybody. So we've got to now train the publishers. It's like, when you send this email, this is not coming from Morgan. So it's not coming from Philip or Boom. You don't write the email as if it's coming from you guys. You write it as if it's coming from the shop.
Oh.
So it would land in your inbox as coming from Heroes for Sale, and it's like, hey, Kieran Gillen's got this new book coming out, and we think you've followed some of his stuff before. Log into your ComicHub account. Here's the first 3 pages for you to look at. If you like it, then send the order, and the order then flows back to the retailer. So it's a retailer centric information solution, but it's letting everyone connect with who they need to.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, when that Boom, well, I might as well just walk through that really quick. So you
Sure.
launched a partnership with Boom Studios for Once and Future, the new upcoming comic from Kieran Gillen and Dan Mora. That they're doing a whole lot of things for this, but specifically in regards to what you're doing, what they're doing with ComicHub, is they have a partnership where they'll be doing direct email marketing, and I think in-app advertising as well, from what I understand. In which I believe there was some sort of social component, but that part was a little unclear. But the thing that really kind of, the only part that kind of stood out to me as a potential negative is like, did the retailers have to agree to this? And it sounds like basically the emails won't go out to the customers unless they approve it. So it relies upon retailers recognizing the value of this and wanting to send this out. But I have to say, like, the secret sauce element to what you just said to me, because I work in marketing, that's what my day job is. If it came from ComicHub in specific, or if it came from Boom, I don't think it would have worked nearly as well as coming from the shop itself. The fact it's going to come from them with their branding, that means it's a known quantity to this customer. It's basically a tastemaker for that customer being spoken to directly, which is exactly what you want out of that equation.
Yeah. And it was also an extension. So already inside the ComicHub POS, there's already a lot of this kind of smart marketing that stores can do themselves. So I can already go in to the marketing component of ComicHub and start to do these kind of campaigns. So for Batman Damned, we were selecting everything by everyone who's currently getting Batman Rebirth, and then, who else also got Constantine. I think I added 100 bullets for that as a relo factor. And then, so we're already building these emails and sending them out regularly to our customers. Where this tool adds to that is we don't do a lot of the smaller marketing, the smaller publisher marketing. So things like Ahoy Comics, they did, they got a comic out at the moment called Bronze Age Boogie. And it was one that I read, so I then found some customers to send out to. And I'm having really good success with that particular item. But I don't have time to be doing a campaign for every single comic in the catalogue. Just coming back to the same situation that we were talking about before. So when you get down to some of the smaller titles, it's not worth it for me to sometimes send out an email that might only attract 4 people, or I might only be connecting with 4 people.
Right.
I'll do it for a big book. I mean, I've sent emails to one person based on selections and had orders come back for, big variants or statues. You can use it that way as well. But from a publisher's point of view, at that hub level, when they look at the sort of metadata, and they still can't see customer information, all they can see is the number of people for the questions that, how many people buy this from this creator or how many people buy this brand. For a publisher to then do those things, if they were getting a hit of, say, 600 or 700, it's worth it for them to build the asset and then send it down to us. And then at the store level, as I said, you might only have 5, 10 or 15 people that you're going to connect with. It's a campaign that you may not have bothered with. But all you have to do as the retailer in that instance is just click yes. Yeah, I agree to that. These are the people you want to send to. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And it's so it's expanding on those tools that we've already got into some of the smaller areas to boost up the back of the Diamond Preview, because that's where we're seeing most of our growth as well with the ComicHub tools. It's, like I said before, people buying stuff that I wouldn't have ordered.
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, like, I already liked it. I already liked the idea of it. But I mean, really, like what we're kind of talking about, at least from a publisher perspective, is you effectively have turned hand selling into something that they can leverage in a macro scale, which is really kind of amazing. I mean, because like hand selling is the one of the greatest powers that a retailer can have. It's like I actually got back into comics because I went into a shop and a clerk recommended Y the Last Man to me because I said that I was interested in Preacher, and so he recommended another Vertigo comic to me. It just happened to be one of the best Vertigo comics ever made, and so it's like that connectivity is really kind of how you sell the best method of selling new comics to customers who may not discover it otherwise. And that's I don't know. I mean, like as a person who works in marketing and is interested in comics, like this is extremely awesome to me.
Yeah, and one of the, I remember this is a few years back. ComicHub was obviously quite consuming of my time, and I was in the store one day. I was like, I'm just going to read some comics all day. That's all I'm doing today. I don't want to look at an email. I don't want to have anything to do with any part of the software. I'm just going to read comics. That's why I'm doing it. And I remember I sat down and I read Manhattan Projects.
Oh yeah,
and like, wow, this is why I do this business, because I love these kind of stories. And since then, our sales of Manhattan Projects are equal to our sales of Saga.
Wow.
And that's purely because I've read it and loved it, and I know who I can pass this on to. And I'm seeing the same thing now with Bronze Age Boogie as a single issue. As retailers, we spend so much time working on the business, and what you said at the beginning of this podcast is the amount of time, so much of that is consumed looking at information that goes nowhere. Reading emails that I'm not going to order from this, or reading an email where the information you've already seen 2 or 3 times before. We're getting the initial order, we're getting the FOC. That's when we need to be focusing on the work and handling the information flow. For the rest of it, we should be reading comics and talking to customers. Mm-hmm. And the way this industry is set up at the moment, a lot of us just don't have time for that side of it.
So back in the beginning, when it was just a Heroes for Sale product, did you, I mean, it sounds like you did this with Manhattan Projects, but were you kind of like testing the viability of it by kind of picking out choice projects, choice comics that stood out to you and seeing if this would work if you leveraged those for your own store?
No, I once I'd realised that I was the person in the way of my own business for the ordering, I was kind of all in. Right, I need to find ways to make this work better for customers.
Sure.
And just, I want to be in the shop. I'm going in today, and I'll read some comics and I'll talk to some customers, and that's what I really enjoy doing the most.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy comic retail. It's a lot of fun. And I'm starting to enjoy it again now that ComicHub is. I mean, it'll never be finished, but it's at a point now that gives me more time to be in store.
Right. And you have a team, right? I mean, like, so I got in contact with Adam Freeman, who used to work for Valiant. And so it's like you have people that are working with you that kind of afford you the opportunity to do the other things that you enjoy. Because I don't know, I mean, as efficient as you sound, given the fact that you were previously working, creating a database management system while also running a pizza empire. I mean, like that's pretty busy, but at the same time, creating something like ComicHub while also running a comic shop, that is the definition of two full-time jobs.
Yeah. And the first version of ComicHub, as I said, I wrote myself, but once other stores saw it and said, hey, look, we'd really like that as our POS, when I thought, well, if I'm going to sell this, because I hadn't written software for 15 years, there was a big gap. And I thought, if I'm going to sell this, then I need to have it rewritten. So that's when we went and set up, my wife and I went and set up a company in India. So we've got 7 full-time developers working on all parts of it as well.
Wow. Did you, I mean, it might be, I am curious if you originally imagined this being something that could be a product for other shops, or if this was just like, man, I got to do this better because the way it's doing right now sucks.
There's multiple things that ComicHub solves for the industry, and one of them was the elephant in the room, which is Amazon. Mm-hmm. And down here in New Zealand, I was looking at what was happening to stores in the US and thinking, this is going to happen to me one day. I need to get ahead of this game. So looking at the way the data and information is flowing, it's like, well, if we replicate this for everybody, then we have a viable product to compete with them with. And we just relaunched ComicHub.com about 2 weeks ago. Prior to the relaunch, it was more of an information site about what we're doing. The main site now is an aggregate site for everything that's in all our stores. So it's where people are now starting to go to find comics or anything pop culture. And I think, at the rate we're building, I would imagine by the end of this year, we'll probably be the biggest site for by sheer quantity of items that you can find that are related to the comic industry spread across our network of stores.
Mm-hmm. Yo, everybody. I want to take a second to talk about my friends at TKO Studios. TKO Studios is a new comic publisher that launched with what the New York Times calls an impressive slate of talent. They publish books by top creators, including Roxane Gay, Jeff Lemire, Garth Ennis, Gabriel Walta, and many more. TKO also does things differently than other publishers. They binge release their books and offer each title in whatever format you most enjoy reading your comics in, whether that's a 6-issue set in a collector's box, trade paperback, or digital download. I'm a single issues guy, so I went that route and I love the collector's box. Even better, all of TKO's first issues are free to read at tkopresents.com right now. So if you're curious, visit tkopresents.com to give them a try or follow at TKO Presents across all social platforms. And if you're a store that's interested in stocking TKO's books, email retailers at tkopresents.com to learn more about one of the best retailer deals in the industry. And now, back to the show. So when you were originally trying to start build up the retailers that you were trying to get signed up for ComicHub, were you strategic with who you chose to work with, or was it all about interest? I mean, like, I know 2 shops that I'm friendly with, Books with Pictures in Portland and Big Bang Comics in Dublin. they both use your system, and they've been very enthusiastic about it. I mean, just on a pure sell-through tracking metric or a sell-through tracking perspective, I believe, and Bruno and John from Big Bang could yell at me if I'm incorrect about this, but I believe that they used to basically track through Excel spreadsheets and prayer, like a combination of those two things. And now, like, Comic Hub makes it way easier, especially when they used to do those weekly comic market tweets that I don't know if you ever saw them do that, but they would talk about sell through on the comics that they were selling in their shop. And it seems like something like Comic Hub would be especially important for them because they are, or maybe especially important for you because they're a very public comic book shop, all things considered. Were you strategic with who you approached, or was it, like I said, was it all about interest?
I think I was a bit naive as to the pickup. I mean, it is, and the clients who have it now are like, you know, it's a great solution, and I thought there would have been a faster pickup, and I thought there was going to be a faster pickup and engagement of publishers because there was always that chicken and egg situation. If we had more retailers, there's more information for publishers to look at. If we had publishers, there'd be more retailers who would engage because there's other assets coming down the pipe. And I assumed, or I mistakenly thought that there would be other industry players would have gotten involved earlier. So it has been a long slog, and we have kind of gone for, you know, if a shop wants to be involved, okay, let's work with them, let's get it out there. But now we've got these stores like Big Bang and Katie's Books of Pictures who are using it, and their customers are using it. And one of the better quotes about Comic Hub has actually come from Kendall Swafford at Up and Away in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. And his quote is along the lines of, "I want Comic Hub to succeed, just not in Cincinnati." So it's kind of, you know, he loves it. It works great, and it's, you know, Kendall has been fantastic in helping us evolve the product as well, and patient. Should get that out there. But he doesn't want his, and that's. Yeah, I'm the same. About the only place in the world that you can't get Comic Hub is New Zealand. I don't want my competitors to have it. I mean, a couple have approached me, and it hasn't really gone far enough. But I think one day it's going to have to happen. But at first, once you got it, and you can start to communicate so much more effectively with your customers, because there is so much more than just the app and the publisher marketing tools. It is a far more effective way to communicate with your existing customer base if you're using all the tools. So, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that if everybody in a specific market like Cincinnati had it, it would definitely, then everybody would have the same tools. It's like you lose your competitive advantage.
Yeah, well, kind of. You start to, because there are so many pieces to it. It's got a built-in rewards program, so you can start to move beyond just focusing on the people who come in every week. You can start to target people who, you know, we send out emails. So for the comic marketing, we're looking at the way the publishers do it, and we're doing that same thing in store for something like Batman Damned. Mm-hmm. But for graphic novels, for things like Paper Girls, when the next graphic novel of that arrives, that's when we will do the email marketing for it. The day it actually arrives into the shop, we'll be sending it out to everyone who's bought the previous 3 volumes of Paper Girls. Will get an email saying, hey, this has now arrived. And it will also then have a direct link to our website for them to purchase straight away, because recognise that market segment shop differently to the people who arrive every Wednesday for, Walking Dead 193 just blew up. We need to have a copy of that. There's a huge amount of people that come into our stores that just could not care less about the collectible side of our industry and just want to read stories. And the tools allow you to target that group of people in a different way at different times as well. So it is a kind of, rising tide floats all boats kind of scenario. If every shop in a city was using ComicHub, it would be better for all of them, because everyone's going to be, the market itself just gets bigger at a retail, at brick and mortar level.
I do have to say that I like that the graphic novel perspective, just because I trade weight. I'm mostly single comics still, monthly comics still, but there's a fair amount of books that I trade weight, and probably the single biggest reason that I stopped buying books in trade has nothing to do with quality, and it has more to do with the fact that I literally forget it exists because it takes like 7 months or 8 months for the next one to come out. And having that reminder is actually extremely valuable because it reminds me to come back and get that book. I actually sometimes wonder, like, it's easy to say that, like, maybe like it's a qualitative reason why somebody's not picking up the volume 7 of, I don't know, Saga after buying the first 6, when it very well may just be like they got busy and forgot, which is kind of a funny thing to say, but it's true. It just happens.
And it's something you can pick up at an airport or in another city.
Right.
So you're not necessarily going to go back to the main store you got it from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that we've built into the ComicHub customer tools, is it's also building their collection for them. So we have customers in our shop and they'll pull their app out and they check, oh, have I already brought this? So they can see if they've, whenever they purchase something, their comic collection has been automatically maintained. So one of the ideas that I'm hoping that we'll end up with is people would shop at ComicHub stores because they want to continue to have the items maintained in their collection.
Sure.
So if a customer from Cincinnati was in New York, he'd find a comic shop in New York, ComicHub, and buy from them. So it fills up as does that side of it automatically for him.
I do think, you mentioned about how it's been a little bit slower to get buy-in from publishers and from retailers than you were hopeful of. Comics is a really interesting market, though, because I kind of feel like the comic industry has always been very slow to get onto current trends. And I mean, I don't think anything possibly exemplifies that more than the fact that, when it was announced that you had this partnership with Boom, some people were like, oh my God, this is a crazy thing. And I'm like, this is targeted marketing. This is kind of I'm not slandering your business at all, but it is kind of like, in a general, like, I work in advertising. It's a kind of basic thing that you do. You find your audience and you target it. But like ComicHub is like the first thing that's really allowed companies to do that, outside of, like, let's say Comixology probably does it because they know who their audience is. But anyways, like, how much of trying to grow those publisher connections and new buy-in from retailers comes from just basically trying to overcome concerns about changing the way that they do things, just because, we fear change. The comic industry fears change.
As I mentioned earlier, one of my earlier businesses was a pizza shop, and that was a franchise. And I can remember going to a franchise meeting with one of my fellow franchisees and coming out of it, and I said, why are these meetings always end up as a screaming match? We all own a store that's part of a chain, yet every meeting we have with the franchise owner, just by the end of it, it's like, why are we coming here? And he said, it's because we're all individual business owners. We've got into business for ourselves, and we don't want to be told what to do. Yet we're part of this group, so we have to accept some, ideas from an office that isn't us. And I think when you apply that to the comic industry, it's even worse, because we're all individual business owners, and we don't even have an overall, Godfather organization or whatever that's supposedly working for us. There's various industry players, DC and Marvel are certainly doing things regularly that help us, Image and those sorts of things. But there's every individual shop owner is someone who's gone out there. They've taken on a lease. They've hired staff, hopefully by this stage. They're in debt to whatever to get things started. And if they can make it work, then it's very easy to look at it and go, why would I change this? This is working for me. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been harder from that point of view, because you're talking to people who have a business that, I'm at Comics Pro, or I'm at a Diamond Summit, or I'm at, Comic Con. And you're talking to people who've managed to get there as well. So it's hard to sort of get across to them, hey, I've got this idea that's going to make your life easier. And they're like, well, I'm already doing the thing I want to be doing, which is owning a comic shop. I'm turning up at these conferences. So I've always kind of been on the back foot to try and convince retailers that this is something that you probably really want to have a really good look at, because it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And without getting right from the very start, when I started showing this to people in the US, which was about 4 years ago, I had that problem with the publisher-retailer situation. I needed to get more retailers before the publishers would take interest.
Mm-hmm.
So we made that decision that even though we'd already built tools for publishers, several years ago, we weren't going to bother trying to push them anymore. We were going to make sure that we got the store numbers up. So I think even though we're at about 70 shops now, we're at 30,000 customers using the app with the accounts. And then beyond that, you've got an even greater number of customers in the stores. So I don't know how you quantify that number of people who actually don't have ComicHub accounts, but we've now got a far greater pool of information that's got publishers interested in what we're doing. But I understand why retailers wouldn't. If you've got a POS system and it's already made your life easier, how could another POS system make your life even easier again?
Right.
Especially one that's going to be, is continually evolving. So it's a monthly fee, and it's something that shops look at and go, no. So it's not until we've got the situation where we've now got our existing retailers out there going, ComicHub makes you far more money than it costs you a month, and it gives you all these other tools that you needed. If it's 2019 and you don't have a full e-commerce website or a plan for one, and I get why you won't, then why are you buying up back issues? Why are you expanding into some of these different product markets when you're just looking at a finite number of people coming through your store? Mm-hmm. To me, that's Vegas style, throwing the dice. Buy a big statue to put in your shop in the hope that the few hundred people a week that come through your store, one of them's going to buy it. That's brave.
Yeah,
I would much rather have that thing online, and then if a few hundred people coming through are going to buy it, cool. But you've opened up a far greater range of options for you, and some of the old stock that we sell through our website, just when some of those packages go out the door, I'm just smiling.
You're like, finally.
I got full price on that. Woohoo!
Is now that you've reached kind of with 30,000 ComicHub customers in the system and everything like that, does that make it easier to sell the value of the system to publishers now? Because it's like you can go to Boom and you can say, hey, you do this once in future promotion, you can know exactly what sell-through was. Like, you can have data that's telling you not just how many comics were ordered, but how many were actually sold. Because that seems like, I don't know, that's like sell-through always has kind of felt like the missing variable in the equation of comic shops. And it seems like, at least in part, ComicHub solves that. Yeah.
And we're at a point where those numbers now, if I remember my high school statistics correctly, those numbers now extrapolate out across the industry.
Like, so statistically significant?
Yeah. You don't have to look at us and go, oh, it's only 70 shops. Like, no, that's a proof. You're going to have a really good idea of the sell-through across the entire industry based on this, of what's going on out there. So I think we've hit that kind of critical mass from the publisher point of view to actually start looking at the data we've got and go, okay, this is now valuable. This now makes sense. And I understand it. And that was the first piece of information that we had for publishers. That's what I was sort of pitching at them a few years ago when I first started to meet them at the first Comic Pro meetings was, hey, we've got the sell-through data for you. And then they were like, yeah, but you don't have any stores. Okay, I'll go get the stores. So then we got the stores, and I started to look at some of this marketing. It's like, okay, now we're ready to expand that. So I shot over to India and did a 6-week trip with our team in February to make sure that, or January, February to make sure that the publisher marketing tool was going to be ready for the Charlotte Comics Pro to show them all. So all of the publishers who have seen it, I get the feeling they're now looking at it going, okay, this guy's been coming here for 4 years and showing us this. It's now inevitable.
Right.
That's the feeling I got out of Charlotte was like, oh, okay, he's finally done it. They've got this to the point that it's now really usable for us. And then, yeah, it's just a case of moving forward and continuing to focus more on retailers, knowing that publishers now knew that, I don't know if inevitable is the right word to use, but it's a case of, this is now a product in the market that we can also be using effectively.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that they're probably used to people coming and going and like selling their or trying to sell their products at these types of meetings and just being like, is this person going to stick around 4 years? Like, it's like now you've made it. You're in. You're like, he's not going away.
Yeah, and bringing Adam on board has been fantastic for us as well. I think it's added a bit more to that side of the equation. You know, it's no longer this guy from New Zealand that keeps turning up in crazy shirts and a funny accent.
Yeah.
It's now he's got someone from the industry,
Right.
who's recognised, and Adam, you know, he obviously now has a far greater intimate understanding of the product and the data. So, you know, it's it's almost a curse the other way. He's like, oh, can we do this? Can we do this? I'm like, slow down, boy. Yeah. So he's been fantastic. Yeah.
So I actually want to ask a question about sell through because I think that part is really interesting because you do have the ability to track all this. It in a lot of ways is like your silver bullet, one way or another. It's like it makes retailers' lives easier. It makes like obviously shops or publishers being able to do what Boom is doing, where like, you know, the marketing only really, you know, counts against you if it actually results in a sale and everything like that. So there's like a lot of value there. Is there like I don't know. I don't really know how to properly phrase this, but it feels like there's like a fine line where it goes from like you're using the sell through data in like a useful way, and then like there's like a level you could get to where it's just like, okay, maybe we're overusing this data. Like, are you careful about how you manage that sell through data and how you like reveal that?
The information is completely anonymous, so
Okay.
all publishers see are numbers.
Okay.
So if when they go to look at the once and future sell through, they aren't going to see Heroes for Sale bought 100 copies and has 20 left. They are going to see 70 stores brought X thousand copies and this is what's left. They don't get a breakdown.
Okay.
Because they don't need it.
Right.
As part of it as well. And, you know, it's, as a ComicHub is retailer centric. It's an information solution for the entire industry, but all that information is about making the retailer the stronger partner in the game. There's other things that I've kind of looked at. It's like, well, what if a publisher wanted to reach out and help a shop? That, you know, if they saw that there was a lot of a product still sitting there, and then we just changed the way the information flows there. So instead of the publisher saying, I want to know who this shop is, we can just turn it around to, well, we can ask the shops if they want to know you want to know.
Oh.
So it would be a case of we could just send, you know, a query into the stores POSs when they start up that said, you know, if you've got more than 15% of this comic left, do you want to contact, you know, Boom's prepared to contact and talk to you about it, or whatever, or different ways to manage that. So it would be, the contact would arrive from ComicHub to the retailer, but the initiation of following through on that would be the retailer contacting the publisher. Those are the ways I've thought about making sure that the information is protected. And a lot of this comes back to early on with ComicHub, I remember when we were setting up the database layouts and things, and Sony got hacked. Like, it was like this big news. I mean, it was big news in my tech world. It was like, I remember looking at it and thinking, if Sony got hacked, what chance have I got? You know, there's just no way I'll be able to buy this. And then the end result was, well, just don't store any information that's useful. So we don't really store any customer information online. We don't keep, you know, we don't store any credit card information. It's all done through third-party gateways. The amount of information that is actually useful from a hacker's point of view to what we've got there, and it's all stored in Microsoft Azure, which is one of the most secure networks anyway. But the information you would see is pretty much gibberish.
Yeah.
Really not a lot of anything that's really helpful up there, because it's all, even when the stores submit the sell-through data to our cloud tools, it's all done by each publisher has a different key for each store. So even if someone worked out that, you know, from just a pure volume number in an article, oh, that's the key for, you know, Heroes DC account, that's all they've got. They wouldn't know the Boom account ID. They wouldn't know any other publisher. So It's really, yeah, I think we've done a really good job of keeping everything secure and petitioned and allaying all those fears that, you know, we keep coming up against.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, at least in the publisher retailer relationship, it's like ComicHub is almost like the intermediary who may or may not set up a blind date between the two of them. It's
Yeah,
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that's certainly. I don't know. It's funny because when I came into this, there was like a couple. I mean, obviously, I don't own a comic shop, and I'm not a comic publisher or anything like that. But there were a couple concerns I had just from a business perspective, and it seems like, I don't know, everything you've said have kind of alleviated my concerns. I have just a few more questions. One quick one though is like, would you ever do, like, creator-owned comics are a big deal, like or maybe if there's a, actually Kickstarter would be a bad example, but a creator-owned comics, like if you have an Image book, a lot of the marketing can fall upon you. Like, would you ever work with a creator instead of a publisher
yeah,
from a marketing perspective?
definitely. 100%. I mean, it's all. Wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah.
And one of the other areas of the industry that I think we solve is, if you look at sort of things like the comic shop locator service,
Mm-hmm.
which I just don't understand why. I mean, it made sense once, but I look at it now, it's like, how's this just not Google?
Right. It is Google.
Comic shop, why are people paying to be listed on this service? And then the flip side of that is, if you were a creator at a comic convention and you just spent, an hour drawing a picture for someone, and then they were like, oh, where can I get your work? If you're a creator, you're going to say Amazon.
Right.
Because you're not going to want that person to walk into a comic shop that may not stock your goods.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you said to them, oh, just go, look us up on ComicHub, then you can find the nearest shop that's stocking all works by that creator. And we've got creator profile tools there as well. So you can go and search for Jonathan Hickman, and it'll show you everything that's across our network and where you can find it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already started to look at ways to help creators. Creators can also, they can attach original artwork to items on ComicHub. This isn't something that we've used yet, but the tool already exists. We've built it. So any artist can go in and they can take their Manhattan Projects pages and they can put the original artwork on each of the comics. So if a customer went and looked at issue 17 and there was still 6 pages for sale, they'd be attached to the item.
Wow.
So I want to work with creators. I mean, or publishers, either way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it seems to me that, like, a lot of times, there aren't a lot of options for direct marketing for publishers or creators. And then you have, let's say, a good example is like a comic I really liked from a few years ago was Lake of Fire by Nathan Fairbairn and Matt Smith, and it was a book that, like, I don't think lit the world on fire, so to speak, but I think that it's one that has, like, inventory that's probably available that I think there's, like, a real opportunity to sell, like, and for like somebody like Nathan Fairbairn, if he wanted to go in and he wanted to target specific like locations or something like that, and say, like, hey, if you like this comic, blah blah blah, send that type of thing. Because, like, I've heard from people, I've brought up this example a million times, like JP Jordan at Big Bang Comics sold the living hell out of that book, and Big Bang, like, is known by Nathan Fairbairn as the shop that really, really pushed Lake of Fire. But if you could turn that hand selling that JP did into a macro scale type thing, that, I don't know, I mean, it would make, I imagine that would help with sell through considerably. And I don't know, I mean, it seems like there's a whole lot of opportunities with ComicHub that, maybe, I mean, I'm sure you've thought of a lot of things you're not doing yet, but it seems like there's a lot of potential next steps for where ComicHub could go in terms of audience and in terms of execution.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a creator and you were going to you said, I want to do a comic shop tour, we could say, hey, these are the shops you want to go to. These are the 4 West Coast stores that sell the most of your product, which means you've probably got people in that shop who are either staff or the owner who really likes your work, who's enthusiastic about what you're doing, and this is the shop you want to turn up to. That shop up the road might be a bigger store, but this one down the road sells more of your product.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we could do very easily.
Yeah. So I had a patron question that was just about broader comics marketing. I already mentioned the fact that, comics marketing is very slow to adapt to modern trends. But what do you think we should see more of in comics marketing that we aren't right now, besides, well, kind of everything?
I think we just need to, it's marketing, no matter how you look at it, it's information, right? It's who are you putting this in front of, whoever. I think ComicHub is what we should be seeing more of from marketing, because it's targeted. It's as simple as that. You could, if you're a publisher and you want to go and stick an ad on Facebook and then sit there and go, oh, look, we've got, 12,000 likes of that image. Well, how many orders did you get?
Exactly.
If I put this thing on Instagram and a whole bunch of people click the little love heart, big deal. How many sales did that marketing generate? Whereas for a fraction of the price of both of those platforms, we might not get you 27,000 likes, but we might get you 800 orders by sending it to 2,000 people. Isn't that far more effective?
Mm-hmm. I do wonder, as an outsider, and like this may be something you're capable of that I'm not aware of, but the one side of the equation that maybe ComicHub doesn't address is prospecting, is like finding new potential comic readers. And like I think that's like ultimately one of like the big questions. It's like finding ways to sell more comics to the existing readers is a very good thing, and it's an essential thing. But at the same time, how do you bring in new readers? I think maybe that might be the side that's not being covered nearly as well as it should yet.
I think the prospecting side of it is done by Netflix and Marvel MCU.
Sure.
Those wonderful 2-hour adverts for our industry that come up regularly at the cinema. And that's bringing people into your store. And this is, early on I mentioned that ComicHub has a built-in rewards program. So we've dropped subscriber discounts for rewards. So it's the same thing if you're a regular subscriber. If you were doing 10% off to your books or whatever, whether that's and there are some retailers who are against that as well. But if a lot of shops use that model where you do a discount to have your regular pull. Mm-hmm. The problem with having a discount system in your shop for your regular customers is you're only doing it for your regular customers who are coming in on a regular basis for their weekly comics. And that makes total sense. By dropping the discount system and moving to a rewards program, what this allows us to do in the shop. So if you've got someone who's coming in and they're buying Umbrella Academy graphic novels, and when they get to the counter, our first question to them is, are you in our rewards program? Which is a much nicer way of saying, can I harvest your information from my pot? But that's essentially what you're doing, right? You want to get, because Amazon don't do cash sales, right? Every time they sell something, they know who's buying it.
Right.
And they know if you've got a dog, or they know what kind of music you're into. So we need to, comic shop retailers need to get around this whole idea. You want that person. You want to know that person's name. You want to know what they've bought. So even if and the beauty of a rewards program is you don't give a discount the day they buy that first book. They've got to spend more to get the reward back, right? So for us, it's for every $100 you spend in the shop, you get a $10 reward. Well, if you just come in and bought 2 graphic novels, you're not going to hit that value at all. So I don't have to do a discount, which was what my previous program was, but I do get to bring you into my system.
Yeah.
And I think that addresses what you were coming back to earlier, is as a shop now, you have to start getting the details of as many people as you can that come through the door for future marketing, to let them know about events. One of my Free Comic Book Day is fantastic, and I don't want to knock that at all. But I think the way a huge amount of shops deal with Free Comic Book Day is a disaster. And a lot of it is, we go out there to the world and say, come and get free stuff, which attracts a different group of people that you normally wouldn't have in your store. And then if you're on some of the various forums I'm on for retailers, you then have, and they don't come back. And there's this complaining about those people who just come in and grab the free comics. I'm like, well, you told them to come and get free comics, but you didn't have any mechanism in your store to then contact them later to bring them back. So one of the rewards program we have is got the marketing tools inside ComicHub are quite varied. So instead of just targeting someone who's bought Batman and Constantine to let them know about Batman Damned, you can also go in and say, I want to know everybody who's shopped, who hasn't been into my store for for 6 months.
Mm.
Or I can say, I can actually drill down and say, who came to my shop on Free Comic Book Day and hasn't been back since? And then it's like, well, those people respond to sales and free stuff.
Right.
So I can then send them an email that has a reward coupon attached to it that's based on their spend. So I can look at it and go, right, for every $100 you spent on Free Comic Book Day in my shop, I'm going to give you a $5 reward or a $10 reward. And I just tweak that up and down to however I want until I'm comfortable with the numbers. And then I send out, 100 emails to people who I haven't seen since Free Comic Book Day. And they're people who respond to sales and deals. And I can have a sale in my shop just for those 100 people. I don't have to put my whole store on sale. And that group of customers, it's similar to the graphic novel customer we talked about before with Paper Girls. The ComicHub lets you start to look at the buying habits of how some of the general public shop in your stores, and it lets you target them with some more sophisticated marketing. So we're expanding our customer base to beyond just the people who come in for our regular Spider-Man comics every month. It's letting you look at your entire business and segment down those kind of the customers that you have. We did something for Hellboy Day. We just basically said, right, I want to see all the people in the last 2 years who bought anything by Mike Mignola, by Ben Stenbeck, and we just went through all the Hellboy creators, and then we added the brand. So we knew the segment that we wanted to go to, and then we sent out an email to those people saying, hey, it's Hellboy Day coming up. So it lets you, and that's the same thing you'd have for your sort of movie events and growing your business base. I think I answered that. I might have waffled a bit. Yeah, sorry.
No, I mean, I actually, I don't know. I think all of that is really fantastic. And I do want to talk about like the 10% on the pull box thing. I always thought that was kind of interesting. My shop doesn't do that. Don't get me wrong. I would love to have 10% off, but there's always been a part of me when I hear about that, I'm just like, from a business perspective, you're probably already going to sell to these people. And it just kind of seems like you're kind of just robbing yourself of 10% in the process. And it's like, I don't know. I'm not saying you shouldn't reward loyalty, but therein lies the value of those rewards programs, like loyalty programs where it's like, like if it's like a, for example, there's a local running shoe store here in Anchorage, Alaska, where if you buy 6 pairs of shoes with them, the 7th pair you get the average value of those previous 6 pairs of shoes off of your next pair. And like that type, I'm just like, I'm going to keep going there because that's going to be like $130 off of my 7th pair. Like, why would I not keep buying from them? That just seems crazy not to. And it's like those types of things incentivize return visits and buying more stuff rather than just like, I'm getting 10% off because I exist effectively. And so it seems like there's a lot more value there.
I mean, rewards is something that has been drilled into people now for what they'd expect at retail anyway.
Right.
So I think where it's working well for us when we dropped doing the discount is just the fact that it's expanded the number of people that we can connect with.
Yeah.
And as you'll know from marketing, a lot of this stuff is just a numbers game.
Yeah, data is the name of the game. I mean, honestly, like in everything marketing today, it's like, I know this is a horrible way to kind of phrase it, but you kind of alluded to it earlier. It's like really when it comes down to it, it's like by and large, the security stuff that people have a problem with, it's like it's so impersonal to a certain degree. It's like most people are just data to an average like marketer, and it's kind of a horrible way to look at it, but it's also the truth.
Yeah, but Boom don't want to know your name. They want to know that there's 8,000 people they can connect with. They don't want to know that 8,000 people. They just want to know the number.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's how that side of things works.
From a publisher's perspective, like I do wonder if part of I don't like this is just pure conjecture, but sometimes I feel like, and this works off of a patron question I got. Sometimes I feel like to a certain degree, some publishers don't necessarily care as much about sell-through as we might think that they do. So a good example would be if a publisher has lots of order-gated variants. Like they're looking to sell comics to retailers. They're not necessarily looking to sell... Like, I remember a few years ago, Dark Knight 3, The Master Race #1, had a 1 in 5,000 Jim Lee sketch variant. and shops ordered to get that just so they could sell that sketch variant, not because they actually thought that they could sell 5,000 copies of the Dark Knight 3 #1. Do you think that could possibly be part of the reason why like there's a little slow going on the publisher side? It's just like sell-through's cool, but it's not like the end-all be-all for them.
Definitely. 100% agree with it. But I mean, my take on the industry and where it needs to be in 10 years' time is, I think DC and Marvel, if they're 60% of the market now, and let's just say that's 100 million, whatever. I think in 10 years' time, we as a retailer group and as a publisher group, we want to be in a situation where in 10 years' time, DC and Marvel are still selling 100 million of their comics, but they're 20% of the market.
Right.
That to me is where we have to be focused on getting to, and I think that's a big part of what ComicHub was going to allow to happen.
Well, it is actually kind of fitting what you talked about the 10 years in the future. The last question I want to ask is, you are ComicHub in a lot of ways feels like a hopeful thing that you're doing. I mean, it's a good idea, but it's also a hopeful thing because like it is like kind of for you as a retailer, you created something that you thought would make your life easier, and then it became something that could make other lives easier. So it seems to me that you feel like you're invested in the long-term future of comics. What do you hope to see more of from a format and a viability standpoint to like, to improve the long-term future of comic books as a whole?
I think where DC's going with their oversized black label is a good start. I would love to have seen those with a hardback cover. I think that would have been better. If you look at what's going on in France as an industry, I think we need to start looking overseas to why some of these other international markets are so big and what they're doing. And I think we focus a little bit too much on what's actually keeping us going at the moment, which obviously makes sense. But I think the weekly... There was a comic come out from DC, Batman Dark Prince. I don't know if you saw that.
Dark Prince. Is that a Black Label book? I guess everything might be a Black Label now.
Came out about 2 years ago, and the first volume came out, and I think it was a $12.95 US hardcover, and like a 48 or 72 pages. And then the issue 2 then came out about 6 months later. And a lot of people complained because of the delay. People aren't interested in this. People don't want to see, you've taken too long, you've killed the buzz. They did a second print of issue 1. When issue 2 hit FOC, we contacted every single person who'd brought issue 1 or the second print, and we had a 90% reply of saying, oh yeah, man, I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, wow.
It was a high quality, high cost, essentially comic that came out in a format that was very different to anything else, and it worked. It just worked so well that we had people who we'd sold issue 1 to who wouldn't consider themselves comic buyers. They only bought graphic novels as far as they were concerned, but they happily brought in for that format of a book. I just think that's where the production levels have to improve on comics. They have to become. I think they need to become something that doesn't. You buy a product. We're probably the only industry where you buy a product and then the very next thing you've got to do is go and buy a bunch of products to protect it, so it'll actually last.
Yeah.
And that I look at that and think that can't be our future. Having to protect something after you get it because it's not going to last, but you want to keep it, makes no sense. The product needs to come out to begin with in a format that's going to last. It's going to sit on a bookshelf or whatever. So I think that's where we're starting to head to. I know the amount of manga that I sell backs that up, and I think the number of humanoids volumes that we sell with the European translated works starting to grow really nicely as well for us. Again, through some of the marketing tools that we've been able to use to make sure people are aware of those books because they can be so different.
Sure.
But those are the areas in my store that are growth. I mean, I'm excited for Powers of X and House of X. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Hickman's works. But I look at some of the marketing that's coming out around it and the buzz that they're talking about it, and I think I just don't see how anything they're doing is going to help me or help other stores get lapsed readers back in for that title.
Mm-hmm.
It makes no sense for them to be saying order 300-400%. People who are buying X books don't come into my shop anymore. Whatever happened, we wrecked that franchise spectacularly over the last 4 or 5 years. And the final nail in the coffin was that absolutely horrible film that just came out.
I did not see
the idea that, man, yeah, it was like Twilight. So the idea that we're going to be getting new readers back for this, I just look at them and think, really? I don't see how. I don't see why they would.
When you say lapsed readers, do you mean lapsed X-Men readers or lapsed comic readers?
Lapsed X-Men readers who were a chunk in their own right in my store. I had a lot of people who just bought X books, and we don't have many of them at all anymore. So all of the orders that we've got for those two titles have come from people buying East of West or Hickman's other work. They're not returning X title customers.
That's interesting, huh? I will say, I mean, I'm kind of a blend of both. I mean, one of the first rules of marketing is you should never believe that one person is representative of a larger whole. But I will say that I'm getting back on board after, I've been extremely out on the X-Men books for a long time. At the same time, I am also a massive Hickman fan and a real believer in him. So it's like, if it was another creator, I don't know if I'd be there. So, it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B here. But in regards to the quality of the product, I do want to say, I'm not saying that kids are talking about paper quality or cover stock or something like that. But I do think that to a certain degree, one of the secret sauce elements of the success of young readers' books has been that publishers like First Second and Scholastic Graphics really put out a good product. First Second does some of the best books in the market. And it's if I was a parent and I had a choice between, should I buy a floppy comic that's going to get torn up in 2 seconds or this really well-made book, I'd probably choose a well-made book.
That's what's happening in our shop. And a well-made book that every fourth page isn't an advert for something else.
Right. Exactly.
It's I think that's where we're all starting to head to. And every successful shop you talk to has a great kids section now, or younger readers section. It's the growth areas of all of our shops, which is great because that area isn't choked with superheroes as well. There's plenty there, but our new release table, 50% of it is superhero. But from a sales point of view, it's probably higher. But our kids section would be lucky if it's 5% that's superhero. So you've got this whole new generation of readers coming through that are just reading adventure comics or adventure-style stories that really possibly don't even have a genre yet. I mean, it's a bit of fantasy going on in it, but it's, they blend science fiction and fantasy and a little bit of horror so well that the kids are getting a sampling of everything before they decide what they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Stu, this has been incredibly interesting. I've very much enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about all this with me.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Before we go, I want to give a special shout out to Sean Kirkham, aka Big Clutch, one of Off Panel's patrons in another edition of Big Clutch's Beast of the Week, where I highlight a creator or comic that blew me away recently. This segment will sometimes feature guests and sometimes not, and this week it's just me, as I'm going to highlight The Walking Dead going rogue and concluding its series unexpectedly with its 193rd issue. I loved everything about the finale of this long-running series, as writer Robert Kirkman, artist Charlie Adler, and the rest of the team both managed to deliver a perfect coda to their series and gave us something truly surprising with it, as they released the final issue without telling anyone ahead of time. Even better, they didn't even bother waiting for the obvious move of concluding with issue number 200, instead choosing to end when it was the right time to do so. I loved it. So shout out to The Walking Dead, this week's pick for Big Clutch's Beast of the Week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with Stu Colson, the comic retailer and founder of ComicHub, which you can learn more about it on ComicHub.com. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all of the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, following it on Twitter at @SketchComic, or following me at @SlicedFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Nathan House, Litwin Studios, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kingus, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Gibb, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Connor Farner, Vieta Ayala, JDC and Matt Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, Kieran Mark Antonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Greg Lockhart, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bobby Ingus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Phil Nall, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Schipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.